Anne Lamott has some unusual dating advice. So, about 6 years ago, she was feeling overwhelmed. She was in her 60s. She was helping her son raise her grandson, and she was in full people pleasing mode. She was taking responsibility for everyone. She was making sure everyone had what they needed, making sure everyone was happy. So one day she was talking to her older brother and telling him just how exhausted she was. And he tried, presumably to be reassuring, by telling her one of those things that nearly all of us have heard at one point or another, that God never gives you more than you can handle. Anne just about flipped her lid. She got up, she got in her car, and she just drove. And she screamed and she shouted and she raged at life for half an hour. She hated everyone. Everyone needed something from her. And then when she calmed down, she called a friend who listened to her and knew exactly what to say. And she was feeling a lot better by the time she was driving back home. But something had to change. And she knew exactly what she needed to do. She needed to stop putting everyone else first and start looking after herself. Anne embarked on a program of what she calls radical self-care. And she explains it like this. She says, I did 3 months of this radical self-love, of being my own priority, of letting everyone else take the leftovers, of putting myself first, of structuring my days around what would make me happiest, what I need to do, and what I hope to do, and what I love to do. And then I would find time for everybody else. Sounds great, doesn't it? Now, the punchline is this. 3 months to the day after she started her commitment to radical self-care, she met the man who would become her husband. So, is radical self-care the ultimate dating advice? Well, from my perspective, it's definitely up there. It is the pleasure principle in action. Radical self-care can overcome a lifetime of toxic and disappointing relationships. And that's because something profound shifts when we start taking really good care of ourselves. So let's find out how we can use it to create magic in our own lives. Hi, I'm Amy Waterman. I am the author of The Pleasure Principle and a love expert here at yourbrilliance.com. And I am so glad you stopped by. Stick around as we explore what it takes to ditch the need to please. Writer Anne Lamott attracted the love of her life in her 60s by shifting her focus away from pleasing others and onto pleasing herself. Now, her story is so much better in her own words, and you can hear Anne tell it to Tim Ferriss on his podcast, and I will put up a link to that. I love Anne's story because it is so different from the story we've been sold. This idea that if we want to be loved, we've got to start hustling. We've got to figure out what kind of man we want and turn ourselves into the kind of woman he wants. We've got to work really, really hard. And if we improve ourselves and we do everything right, then we will get rewarded when he picks us to be his companion. Now, that's how love worked back in the 1950s when men were looking for a wife and most women didn't have the resources to make a delicious life on their own. But that is not how love works today. Today, marriage is optional. We earn our own living, and we don't want just any relationship. We have the ability to hold out for a healthy relationship that adds joy and happiness and security and contentment to our lives. Now, to get that healthy relationship, we can't date like our mothers did. We can't settle for just getting a man. We've got to learn what it takes to attract good, healthy, healing love. And that's where I think Anne Lamott is so inspirational. Anne is one of the most incredibly honest and open women writing today. She's open about her recovery from addiction, her mental health struggles, her doubts and her fears and her craziness, and also her faith and compassion and joy. Now, you wouldn't look at Anne Lamott and say, she must be beating off men with a stick. You would look at her and say, well, she's been single all her life and now she's in her 60s and who knows if she'll ever meet anyone, which is why I think she is the perfect role model because she's like so many of us. She was raised to be a people pleaser and tend to men's needs. She felt different from everyone else. She felt ashamed of being emotionally sensitive, and she spent much of her early life just trying to figure out how to survive in this harsh, brutal world. And she didn't meet the love of her life until she threw away all of that old baggage and she dared to put herself first. Anne describes radical self-care as, quote, being with yourself the way you would be with somebody you love. So it's about looking after yourself like a parent would look after a child, making sure everything you need, caring for yourself when you're feeling anxious or upset, never judging yourself for not having it all together, making sure you've got cups of tea and snacks and a blanket and people to call when you need to talk. Now, what is so radical about this is that it's about a woman daring to treat herself as well as she treats others. Now, historically, women have not been taught to do this. We've been taught to focus on how everyone else is feelings and put our own feelings aside so that we could show up as the person who's going to take care of everything. Because we know that nobody could cope if the tables were turned. Just think about a relationship you were in which you were so good to the man you loved. You made him dinners and you listened to his feelings and you encouraged him and you told him how attractive you found him and you made his life so easy and so wonderful. And then maybe a personal crisis struck in your life. So your parents got sick, or you got sick, or you lost a beloved pet and you were beside yourself. You were so upset. You were such a mess. You couldn't be there for him because you couldn't get it together. And the question is, what did he do? So what did he do when the tables were turned? Did he show up for you? Did he listen to you and hold you and wipe away your tears and tell you that you are not alone and he will always be here? Or did he conveniently disappear until the crisis was over and you could go back to being the helpful, easy girlfriend you've always been, right? Now, I'm not blaming men here. Yes, men could do a lot better, but we create these relationships too. We set up an imbalance from the beginning where we're taking care of him and we don't even ask him to put in 50%. Now, this is especially an issue for those of us who are that little bit older, who grew up in a time when women were expected to be of service to their husband and families. We expect ourselves to hold our relationships up like Atlas holding up the sky, and we don't expect anything from him because it's just not right to ask a man for more. And what happens, as inevitably as night follows day, is that we get drained. We give and we give and we give. We take responsibility for everything and everyone, and it kills us because our battery gets drained as fast as it gets charged. And there's no break because as long as we live with people, they expect to be pleased, and it's our job to please them. We don't know how to say, no, do it yourself. Help me with this. I'm going to go into my bedroom and shut the door and don't interrupt me for half an hour. And that's on us, right? Anne Lamott's love life turned around when she stopped taking responsibility for all of the people in her life, and she started turning all of those beautiful people-pleasing skills onto the one person who'd never really got to enjoy them, herself. She took all of that energy that she would normally spend on taking care of everyone else, and she spent it on herself. So that's not selfish. That's just giving yourself what you have been giving to other people for so long. So let me ask you, all of those wonderful things that you do for other people, how would it feel to start doing them for yourself? Like, how would it feel to stop feeling responsible for everyone else and just let the men take care of themselves and just focus on what you need? Well, if that sounds impossible, like you couldn't possibly stop taking care of everyone else, I hear you. I've been there too. And that's why I wrote The Pleasure Principle. And that's why I do this work. I am rooting for you. I am sending you so much love, and I will see you next time.